So, what if we could teach an AI to predict a patient's survival from lung cancer, not by crunching numbers, but by just looking at a picture? Today, we're diving into a really groundbreaking idea that does exactly that. It's all about turning super complex genetic data into images, and in doing so, making predictions way more accurate and personal than ever before. To really get why this matters so much, we have to start with a tough reality. Lung cancer is the world's deadliest cancer. We're talking about 1.8 million lives lost every single year. And that's not just some statistic, right? That's a global health crisis that absolutely demands a new way of thinking.
And right at the heart of this crisis is this incredibly personal question. For every single patient who gets diagnosed, the most urgent question is, so what happens next? But giving a clear, reliable answer, that has been one of the trickiest problems in all of modern medicine.
So, why is this so difficult? Well, it really comes down to three huge hurdles. First off, every single tumor is unique. Biologically, it's its own thing. Second, data from different labs can have these tiny technical variations. Think of it like photos taken with different camera settings. They call these batch effects, and they can seriously confuse the analysis. And finally, a lot of the older methods, they just oversimplify the data, and you end up losing a ton of critical information along the way. So, to get around these problems, researchers knew they had to find a completely new angle. Instead of getting lost in all the tiny details, they decided to zoom out and look at the bigger picture of what the cancer was actually doing. And that meant shifting from looking at thousands of individual genes, which honestly, it's like trying to understand a whole novel by just reading random isolated words, to focusing on what are called pathways. Pathways are just groups of genes that work together as a team to get a job done. It's the difference between reading a single word and reading an entire chapter. Suddenly, you get the context. You get the real story of what the cancer's up to. And here's how they actually do it. For every patient, they calculate an activity score for 658 of these biological pathways. What this does is it creates this incredibly unique biological fingerprint for every tumor, showing exactly which functions are kicked into overdrive and which ones are basically shut down. Now, having this fingerprint is a massive step forward, but it brings up a whole new puzzle. How in the world do you teach a computer to read it? And this is where we get to the most creative and powerful part of this whole story. Okay, so here's the big aha moment. There's this advanced type of AI called a convolutional neural network, a CNN, and it is an absolute genius at finding patterns in pictures. But it's just not built to handle long, boring lists of numbers. So that led the researchers to ask a really simple but profound question. What if we could turn our biological data into a picture? They came up with this really elegant three-step process. First, they calculate those 658 pathway scores we talked about. Next, they group similar pathways together, kind of like organizing your music playlist by genre. And finally, and this is the coolest part, they arrange those scores in a spiral pattern to create a perfect 26 by 26 grid, an image. And the final result is this single, totally unique image for each patient. It's a visual map of their tumor's biology. If a pathway is highly active, it shows up as a bright pixel. If it's not active, it's a dark one. And just like that, a super complex genomics problem becomes an image recognition challenge, something AI is perfectly built to solve. All right, so now that they have these incredible tumor portraits, the next step is to actually build an AI that can learn to read them and make a prediction. The tool for the job, as we mentioned, is a convolutional neural network. This is the exact same core technology that powers facial recognition on your phone or helps a self-driving car tell the difference between a stop sign and a pedestrian. It is designed from the ground up to find meaning in visual patterns. But they didn't just use a standard off-the-shelf CNN. No, they built a smarter version they call phenotype aware. See, a normal CNN only looks at the image itself. This enhanced version, it also gets to see the patient's clinical data, things like their age and the stage of their tumor, so it can understand the full story. The real secret sauce here is something called an attention mechanism. Basically, it teaches the AI how to connect the dots. It tells the model, hey, listen up. For this specific patient, a 70-year-old with a stage 3 tumor, these particular patterns in the image are the ones that matter the most. And that ability to focus, that's the real game changer. It's what makes the model so deeply personalized. It's not just classifying an image anymore. It's interpreting that image within the context of an individual person's life and their disease. And that allows for a much, much more accurate prediction. So after all of this brilliant work, from pathways to pictures to smarter AI, what's the bottom line? Why is this such a massive leap forward for how we treat cancer?
Well, the researchers themselves call it a whole new paradigm. It's functionally grounded because it looks at what the tumor is actually doing, and it's platform independent, which is a fancy way of saying it works around those technical glitches between different labs, making it universally useful. Let's just break down the big takeaways here. First, this model is simply more accurate because it sees that big biological picture. Second, it's more reliable. It works across different hospitals because it smartly sidesteps those technical batch effects. Third, it's interpretable, meaning a doctor can actually look and see which biological pathways are driving a patient's risk. And finally, it is truly, deeply personalized, tailoring its prediction to each unique person. Ultimately, this whole research project leaves us with a really powerful idea. Maybe the biggest breakthroughs won't come from just getting more data, but from finding a new way to see the data we already have. By translating the very language of cancer into a picture, we've unlocked a whole new level of understanding. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other complex diseases are just waiting for us to find the right lens?